Hello and welcome to All Aboard TII's Accessibility Podcast. This is a podcast about accessibility and sustainable public transport brought to you by Transport Infrastructure Ireland. I'm Claire Scott and I'm joined by our All Aboard podcast host, Sarah O'Donnell. Throughout the series, we'll be hearing first-hand accounts from people who use and design public transport systems, and specifically the role accessibility plays in these experiences. And who is this podcast for? In the first instance, we hope to connect with people with disabilities who use our services. But also, it's for anyone who is drawn to human interest stories and has a curiosity to learn more. And of course, we hope to attract listeners who are designers and decision makers for transport systems, who through the podcast might get a better understanding of some of the problems and potential solutions that are out there. So without further ado, let's give this a go and get all aboard TII's Accessibility Podcast. Hi Sarah. So I see we're taking a virtual field trip to continental Europe today. Who's joining us?
Hiya Claire. Today we're chatting to Laura Alshafskoute and to Dr. Tali Hatzakis to get an insight into the TRIPS project. TRIPS is a Europe-wide EU-funded research initiative focused on accessible public transport. Enjoy. So, Laura is a board member of the European Network on Independent Living and is a leading coordinator of TRIPS. Dr. Tali Hatzakis is a research analyst with Trilateral Research, which looks at ethical AI solutions to address complex social issues. Now, the ambition of the TRIPS project is to make public transport more accessible for persons with disabilities, elderly people, and indeed everyone. Laura and Tali, welcome to All Aboard, TII's Accessibility Podcast. I hope that introduction captured what you're about. And obviously we're looking forward now to hearing about the project in detail and about all of your fantastic work. So I think maybe, Laura, if we start with you, it might be useful for people who are unfamiliar with the TRIPS project to maybe get a short summary, first of all, about the research itself, and then maybe we can go into more detail. And I'd also be very interested to hear about your own background in the European Network on Independent Living, or ENIL, as it's referred to, and how you subsequently got involved in TRIPS.
Yes, Sarah, thank you very, very much for your nice introduction. Indeed, I think you summarized the project very well. If I need to say it very shortly, because obviously I can talk hours about TRIPS, it's a 3 years long project in the European Union, and it's funded under Horizon 2020 program. And the main idea, as you already mentioned, is to make the public transport more accessible and more inclusive in the European cities. We are having lots of people involved coming from different fields. So we're having researchers, we're having disability NGOs, which ENIL is representing. We're having transport providers, we're having city municipalities. And in general, I think we have 11 partners on board. So there's a lot of expertise in the project, but our most activities are taking place locally. So there are 7 European cities where most of our activities take place. And these cities are Brussels, Lisbon, Cagliari, Bologna, Zagreb, and Stockholm and Sofia. So we're having quite a huge variety among the cities. And each of the city, they have the local groups. And those groups are combined mostly by the core user teams, which are represented by persons having different types of disabilities. And we also aimed a lot to have very diverse groups, as diverse as possible. So making sure that every access needs is put into the consideration. And those groups are led by the local user lead, who is in the most cases a person with disability themselves. But they're very, experienced in leading such groups. They're very known disability activists. And that was the idea that, to make sure that the process is actually led by the users. So, but of course, they're not working alone. They're having transport providers, both local and national. They're having city municipalities on board. And they also, some of them are even contributing with universities. For example, Stockholm, they're having very close working relationship with Lund University. So So like there are a lot of people on board, and what they're doing is basically looking and designing the future mobility solution or some kind of digital solution on innovation to make sure that we can do something to make transport easier to use for persons with disabilities, but not only to them. Being sure that everyone who's facing barriers in transport that they need are also addressed. So that would be a very short summary about the trip. And when it comes to Enil, I will also try to be very short because Enil is, probably one of the most known European networks, which is led by the members. And we have members, both individuals and disability organizations from all over Europe. And what it represents is mostly working on a disability movement for human rights and social inclusion, based on solidarity, based on peer support, the institutionalization, democracy, self-representation, and self-determination. And our main vision, to say shortly, is that we aim that all persons, despite their disabilities or abilities, are able to have choice and to have control over their lives. So empowering them in a way that to be sure that they are having the same opportunities as everyone else, despite their abilities, and that they are valued members of the community and can enjoy all the human rights as it has been set in the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. So that would be very short about Enil. About trips, I don't know. Sally, if you would like to add something, maybe I forgot something important.
Yeah, of course, everything, as Lara said, starts with the users, and the whole project was designed to, represent that motto of nothing for us, without us.
Mm-hmm.
And we took this to heart because there is, of course, a lot of accessibility, consultancy, and projects, but often the solutions come from experts for the users in the absence of the users, and this is just not right. We wanted to create the process and the tools to facilitate individuals with disabilities to participate in open innovation. So the process itself is an innovation of the project, if that sense, because not only we had to do that, we had to do it in the time of COVID, so we had to do it virtually.
Obviously, the co-design element is hugely important. That's the kind of foundation of the work that you're doing. And I know that from some of the user group sessions that we have, that's hugely important.
Yes, this was fundamental for the approach of the project, not only in the design phase, but also at the strategy, at the prioritization. We didn't want to develop solutions because some transport authority or strategically you had in mind that this is what is needed for them, but let the users decide which solutions should be prioritized.
And Laura, how does that work in practice then, the co-design model?
In practice, yes, indeed. When you read about co-design, and that's another topic I could probably speak for hours, but I personally really like it. I find it very important that everyone is considered as equal partners. And for example, me, I'm representing the NGO of persons with disabilities. So I'm sorry in advance that I will speak a lot on our perspective. And I find it very important, and I find it very important that persons with disabilities are considered as the experts of the accessibility. So they're not only short-term consultants, or someone who's providing one-time feedback, but they're actually involved from the very beginning, from the very end, with having the same right to say that, okay, I don't want this, I think that might not work, or also, on the other hand, say that, okay, this is very needed, this would be very useful for me, this would make my journey more comfortable, more accessible, I would like to have it, and then when you're involved from the very beginning, it's really encouraging you to make sure that, okay, my voice actually matters, I can really find the dialogue with the transport providers, I can make my voice heard to the city authorities and so on, but it's, the co-design is it's very nice, but in practice, it's sometimes very hard to implement. And we noticed that in the cities that, for example, it was a bit challenging in some of the 7 cities I mentioned because it's very non-hierarchical way, and many transport providers or city authorities they want to do it, but they're not used to do it, and for them it was like very new approach. But what can we say that when you give time and you give effort, and if there's willingness from both sides, and that's very important that the willingness would be from both sides and from the users as well, there's possibility to do great things, because it's actually beneficial to everyone who's in.
In terms of your research findings to date, the foundation of the project is based on the Mobility Divide Index and also on methodologies of co-design, which you developed with the sample 7 cities and which you hope to apply to other cities. But Tali, before we get on to that, do you want to talk about your own background with trilateral research and how you came into the TRIPS project?
Okay, so Trilateral is a UK SME. We specialize in we call it socio-technical research because we are looking at the social aspects and the social impacts and the social considerations of the introduction of technologies in society, and of course the ethical implications. So to make sure that the process of developing is ethical, but also the introduction of innovation in society is ethical and it leaves nobody behind. And this is where kind of, so if you like, social innovation is at the core of what we do, even though our projects are more or less commercial.
So just if we talk a little bit about some of the research findings that have come back. So on the Mobility Divide Index, do you want to maybe talk about the 6 dimensions of public transport experience and what that means?
Okay, so the MDI was, if you want to change something, you need to measure it.
Yeah.
We looked at what was out there in terms of measuring accessibility, and a lot of the metrics that come from the industry, we were not sure whether it reflects the user's perspective, how the users see accessibility. So, for example, to measure distance between somebody's house and the bus stop, it's not necessarily the same for somebody who has disabilities and somebody who doesn't have disability. So we wanted to find out what is it about accessibility, how people think about accessibility from their own perspective. So literally we gathered our groups around the cities and our working teams around the cities and said, okay, guys, if we want to measure accessibility from your point of view, what is it that matters to you? What is it that matters to you when you plan your journey, when you go to some stop, when you board, when you wait, like you get information, all the stages of the journey from before leaving your house, planning your journey to arriving to your destination. So we took all of these stages and we literally brainstorm all the factors that stop you or it's difficult for you or deter you from deciding to embark on a journey. And literally went step by step methodologically and brainstorm factors of importance. And once we did that, we kind of clustered things together. What is it that is common in terms of the feel?
Yeah.
So the dimensions were comfort, like everybody needs to be comfortable, like when they're traveling, because if you reach a threshold of inconvenience, you're just not gonna go, right?
Yeah.
And so it was convenient. How convenient something. Safety, very important. And of course, time. Time was really important. Like on average, an hour's journey takes about 20 minutes more for a person with disabilities because they cannot board on
a particular
means
train.
of transport.
Yeah.
Yes, I mean, come on. That's unacceptable. And of course, affordability, which we didn't test because affordability was affordability. It's a common thing. The whole idea of the MDI is that persons with disability should be able to travel on their own, whether they are blind, on wheelchairs, have a hearing impairment. Like, they need to be traveling on their own, preferably without stopping a bus driver to stop the transit and come and help you. What would be? So we wanted to measure that. Can you embark on your journey on your own to a known and unknown destination? And this is what we tried to measure.
And what stood out, you've mentioned some of them there just even in your description, but what stood out for you from that comparative analysis?
A lot of the biggest, because we did also a survey, and this kind of coincides with the findings of our survey. The first and last mile issues of a journey are really important, are really difficult for people. And not so much the first mile, because often journey starts from somebody's house. Mm-hmm. So you kind of choose where you live and you know your area and where you need to go. But the last mile in particular, because especially when you veer off to a new destination, let's say some friends invite you to go to this coffee place and you're meeting and you've never been before. So for Lara, who is on a wheelchair, she might be thinking, okay, I'm coming down from the station. Can I really get on to that cafe from my bus stop?
Yeah.
And especially with new destinations, you never have the certainty that will be feasible. Also, a guiding issue from the survey more than the solutions was the public attitudes and the driver attitude towards persons with disabilities. And this is not just the practical, right? Lara cannot be fighting with a mother with a pram for a space on the bus. It's just like we need to develop some sort of transport etiquette with how we coordinate with other passengers with disabilities. And some disabilities, for example, if you're deaf, nobody knows you are deaf really, so they don't look after you. Yeah, if that makes any sense. So that's the interesting subject we don't really think.
I was really interested in reading through your research to hear about the idea of a transport etiquette. And of course, there are infrastructural barriers and digital barriers and all kinds of barriers, but there are also social barriers which can't necessarily maybe be solved through rules or regulations, and it's maybe more through people becoming more aware and then behaviour and etiquette developing out of that. So Laura, in terms of the co-creation side of things, you developed a methodology of co-creation which included people with disabilities and included researchers and municipalities, transport providers and so on. And that methodology was applied to all aspects of the project. So it applied to setting up the project, to carrying out the research and to developing solutions. Do you want to talk about that side of it?
So yes, you're very right, Sarah. It was what we imagined to happen in trips, and as I mentioned, we had these local teams, and they were supposed. Well, we had two different groups of cities. So 4 cities, which was Bologna, Cagliari, Zagreb, and Lisbon. They had full partners on board on trips, so they were expected actually to develop a solution. And for the remaining 3 cities, which is Brussels, Sofia, and Stockholm, they were not expected to actually develop it, but the idea was to design the concept and maybe prepare some mock-ups. So what we aim, that they will do it in a co-design manner from the very beginning. So from the generating the idea and during the workshops, and then developing it, and then even testing it. So we just finished that part. So most cities are actually already did their first testing, and some cities already finished. So we created a lot of interesting solutions.
So each city had a set of deliverables and objectives. Do you want to maybe give some examples of what came out of the city studies?
I think it's fair to say that a lot of them develop different aspects of travel planners because as I said before, this was something that was feasible to actually deliver on in the time frame of the project. But more importantly, it's because irrespective of what type of disability you have, it's important for you to know that the end-to-end journey is accessible and there is no real-time information about that can be given to Laura to know that this is true. And so we try to make sure that different solutions that can safeguard, and give this confidence to people that can reach their destination.
Yes. And the journey planner seems to be so high up in terms of its importance to users. So are you looking to develop a prototype planner? Or is that a recommendation that will be picked up by others? And if so, how might it look and how can transport providers and municipalities work together to develop a really good quality journey planner?
From a technical point of view, we didn't want to create a standalone journey planner because we know that different operators in different cities have their own journey planners, right? So there is no point developing a standalone other journey planner for disabled users. Yeah. We wanted to create, if you like, a technological layer, something that can be superimposed, that be a functionality of existing journey planners. Yeah. So if there's a journey planner in Brussels, you take our layer, you superimpose it, you integrate it in that existing journey planner that everybody uses, and provide users with accessibility information in an accessible manner. And what I mean is, Laura is on wheelchair, but she can see and she can hear and she can use that. But maybe a blind person needs to have an accessible journey planner with a wayfaring, like with the ability to be directed step by step. That may not be useful for Laura, but it would be absolutely necessary for a blind person. So it needs to be specialized, personalized, depending on the type of disability you have as well.
Yeah. And Laura, just in terms of other aspects and issues that came out of the city studies, what's coming to the fore besides the journey planner?
Brussels, which is one of the most inaccessible cities, unfortunately, in Europe, they were very much focusing on having the accessible vehicles and real-time information that you actually can get on an accessible tram or an accessible bus. Stockholm, which is a bit more advanced when it comes to accessibility, they raised the issue that it's very annoying every time to enter the details you need. For example, what is the measurements of your wheelchair if you're traveling with a wheelchair, or what the assistance you might need at the station. So they wanted to have this improvement that you provide some personal information and it's stored and it's passed on, and the information you're receiving back as the user is related with what you actually need. So for example, if you're traveling with electric wheelchair, to make sure that you have enough space on a vehicle to embark yourself. So they're focusing also on that. And Sofia, besides having working on the accessible journey planner app, they also made a mock-up of the accessible bus stop. And it was a very nice concept, and we have very nice mock-ups how it should look like, but it's also how to make this stops more user-friendly and to making sure that everyone, despite their impairments, they can check, the information which is relevant to traveling by bus. So when you see it, it seems very similar solution, focusing on a digital journey planner, but then if you go more into depth, people are raising different aspects, just as Kali said so. So it was very interesting to see, how it's actually developing throughout all the months.
The mock-up of the accessible bus stop sounds so great. And I was also very interested to read about the so-called intelligent bus stop, which was developed as part of the accessible bus stop mock-up in Sofia. But in terms of assistive technology generally, maybe tell me more about the intelligent bus stop and about the viability of some of the other more futuristic technologies.
So for Sophia, I understood your question. Yes, the intelligent, accessible bus stops basically are intelligent. Like you need to using smart technologies to make a bus stop intelligent. It's not only about a ramp, it's about how especially if you have sensory disabilities, how you relate to finding information, identifying if you're blind that the bus in front of you is the bus you want to embark on without the need, for example, to ask somebody next to you or to ask the driver. So intelligence is part of the requirement for an accessible journey, for an accessible bus stop.
And in terms of other future technologies, I mean, I suppose maybe you'd agree that sometimes they can be a mask for other failings, maybe, or, that probably the primary goal is to have a universally designed, intuitive and accessible public transport system, with really good infrastructure that everybody can access. But there is a role, I suppose, for smart technologies and for future technologies. In some of the literature that I was reading, there's discussions on the sonar glasses, the smart bracelets that have a navigational element, even smart mobility canes and all of that. I mean, in your opinion, Tali and Laura, what role does that kind of future technology play in finding solutions?
Yeah. I was looking at Tali because I think that's a big part of your survey. Which we did as one of the activities of the project. But just I can say shortly that actually users they're very keen to use the assistive technologies if they're really reflecting their needs and if they're making the person more independent. Actually, they if I remember well, and Tali, please feel to step in and. I remember that users were very favorable towards, for example, wearables. So, for example, if you have like bracelets, which helps you to open doors or, to move the ramp, like we have these kind of questions like, would you use something like this, in your daily life? And then shortly describing the assistive technology, the users were very fond on these, which is not making a big deal out of it, but also making your life easier. So I think that another favorable thing was for visually impaired people who are like saying that virtual reality glasses was something that they would like to have, provide the real-time information about the environment. Robots, yeah, they were also very favorable to help you like to do the housework, or for example, if you go shopping, they can carry your stuff, or the things you have bought. So I think users are very up to use this. It's innovative, it's easy to use, and it's reflecting their needs. It's not something like I was not very surprised because I represent the disability NGOs, but I know that some of our partners were that exoskeletons were not a very common, choice among the persons with disabilities. Because they say and then I step in like as a representative of disability NGO that it's very important to make sure that the dignity of disabled person is represented. And when it comes to assistive solution, you need to be sure that when you're creating it is that the purpose is to make a person more independent, not that make disability more like visible or making something like innovative about it, because many people, they feel very good with their disabilities, and the only barriers they're facing is not, with self-acceptance, because that's totally fine for many people. But the real issue for them is that there are lots of barriers, and especially social barriers to them to have the fully independent life with the equal opportunities. And then, when you create something, you need to be sure that, okay, you're actually contributing to the person to be more independent, as I said, not, to making like, I don't know, bringing you too close to the norm, which is a medical model, and we're not very fond of that in Enil. If it arises from the need and it tackles the barriers, then it would be something probably that people will use. And if it comes, like without doing the proper research, without having those people, the users involved from the very beginning, then it might be risk. It might be that people will not accept that.
Yeah.
And I think it comes to any other product, right? It's not only about the persons with disabilities. It's like, why would you use something if that's not needed? So
absolutely.
So it's also very important to have that in mind.
Sometimes we experts have this idea that the users want X, and we don't ask them if this is something that they would actually want. So I remember I was talking with Frank, Laura's colleague, and we were writing the proposal. He's also on a wheelchair, and we were talking about exoskeletons, right? This is an up-and-coming emerging technology and stuff like that.
And sorry,
could make you walk.
For people who don't know, what is the exoskeleton? How does it work? Briefly.
So it's almost like it's a mechanical, if you like, body structure that you can. You're a little bit like Robocop. Like you wear this on top of you, and it uses technology and smart technology to help you lift yourself, to help you walk.
Sure.
And also to sometimes to help you even lift stuff. So you look a little bit like a transformer when you're wearing it. And so I was talking to Frank, who was on a wheelchair, and said, like, would you wear, like, as a wheelchair user, would you wear this? Would you like to have something that assist you to actually walk? And the answer was no. I am comfortable with my wheelchair. This is part of, my identity and what I'm used to. How I'm used to kind of go around.
Yeah.
And that will be completely foreign. So there's no point investing in this technology unless we have the market for it. And we should be asking the people whether this is something, a solution for them, not assume that it will be assumed that they will want it.
So, I mean, I just was interested in terms of infrastructure and the role, like cycling infrastructure has been rolled out all over Europe, and in Dublin and Ireland, we're a little bit late to the party on it, but there's a lot of investment in cycling. And you got some interesting feedback in terms of the role that, both the role that the kind of cycle infrastructure and the e-mobility and all of that can play, but also the kind of conflicts that can arise.
There's an actually UK NGO that is called Wheels for Wellbeing, and it's a disability NGO in London that is all about kind of providing alternatives, cycling alternatives for people with disabilities, as well as riding training so people get their confidence and riding in groups and stuff like that. So there is the schemes side of cycling, and scooters as well, right? So it's the same, but it's all. But on the other side, the flip side is the cycling infrastructure.
Mm-hmm.
So with the cycling infrastructure, we know from our studies that a lot of people in wheelchairs piggyback on this infrastructure because it's hurdle free, right? But also it's very scary for them because it's the same lane, very short lane for very fast-moving cyclists, and also people on wheelchair, and also people on mobility scooters. So there's a mixed bag of users in very short space.
Yeah.
So we need to rethink that. Also, for example, some very easy solutions, but also like we need to think about. There are no ramps into the cycle lanes and off the cycle lanes. So how do you do that?
Yeah.
There are also no kind of parking layoffs that people can safely embark and disembark. So these are kind of infrastructure solutions that can complement the existing design of cycle lanes if we just think a little bit different. And it would be useful for mothers with kids that want to ride a tandem bike with their kids, right?
Yeah.
In safety. So it's not just for disabled, it's just for other categories of users too.
Absolutely, yeah. I know that with the introduction of e-mobility, faster bikes, faster electric scooters, there's a whole new conflict between maybe vulnerable walkers, elderly people, all of that. And yet there's a whole kind of world of possibility as well. So I guess it's back to that kind of empathetic co-creation and understanding all of the users,
Sarah, on that point, what I have to say, and I have been saying that in Civitas, is like, who is this infrastructure for? Because I'm sorry, but Europe is growing older by the minute, right? So if you exclude the elderly, people with disabilities which are not a niche group, we are 100, according to WHO, we are 135 million registered disabled users in Europe.
Yeah.
So it's not like a small niche number. So you exclude the elderly, the disabled, the mothers with kids, me, because I'm not going to get on with a fast, I'm not considered elderly, but I wouldn't really want to ride really fast lanes on the cycling. No, I don't want to endanger myself. So who is this infrastructure for at the end of the day?
And in terms of the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, would you say that it's been a game changer in terms of how people are talking about disabilities and in terms of how people think about disability? For example, like you say, things have generally moved more towards the user and towards people's own experience and towards people's rights. So, Laura, how has it made a difference, or has that difference yet to be felt?
CRPD, we call it CRPD, with the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. It's one of the core documents to have it. And we are a very big fan of it, and we're really promoting it hard. Because, yes, truth is that many European countries have signed it, and not only European countries. And they made some promises for persons with disabilities that you will have equal access to all the human rights you should be having. But I must say that, on paper, it sounds way better than it is in reality. And unfortunately, changes are not coming very fast. But at least when you have, the legal paper and countries' legal responsibility to do something, I think it also can help to move the change a little bit faster. And it's really aligned, I would say, with what we're trying to do in TRIPS project and with all the co-design methodology, because when the countries ratified the convention, they have committed to respect the rights of persons with disabilities, and also, as I said, to provide equal opportunities to enjoy accessible and independent traveling as well. And it's stated in the convention as well that you cannot create something without having persons with disabilities involved in the process of creating the future mobility solutions and improving accessibility, because they're the ones who are experts and they're the ones who know what exactly is needed. And I think the message is carrying that over, all our talk, but that's very compliant with the convention itself, because they're also bringing it, okay, people with disabilities exist. That's a lot of them. They're facing barriers. Here is the tool, what you need to make sure that they can enjoy the rights as they should. So I think it's a very important document, and in TRIPS we also been bringing it to whatever where it's possible. And what I also really like it's focusing on a social model of disability, and which is not stating au contraire to the medical model, which the medical model claiming that okay, the person with disability is not normal, and we need to fix him or her or them to make sure that they fit in the society. And the social model is au contraire. I'm telling this to the listeners who may be not familiar with the models, that shortly saying that, okay, everyone is unique. Everyone has different abilities, different strengths, and maybe something that, some issues you are facing. But we as a society, we should be open-minded and to make sure that we reduce the barriers as much as we can, to allow everyone to have equal opportunities.
I think also, if you don't mind me saying, I think the inclusion of
users in the conversations. Something else for me that I have observed, I think transport operators think that they need to spend a lot of money to make accessibility happen because they just cannot think, they cannot empathize with the users. Like if you don't have, you're not faced with a condition, you can't, like physically you can't. So but I found like the users are so reasonable about what they're asking, and some of the solutions is not about spending a lot of money. It's about maybe even spend like very little money that will make such a big difference.
Absolutely.
From their point of view. So these conversations can actually help us save money from the things that they don't want and put money into the things that it would actually make a big difference.
Mm-hmm.
I strongly support what Tali said, and if I might add, there was also, because in TRIPS we also did the research, and we do many things we haven't time to talk about, but one of the research was to identify the barriers. And even myself, I was very surprised when I found out that people, came up to us and said that the government is spending lots of money to have this accessible taxi or specialized service for persons with disabilities. When people say that if I had choice, I would never use it because I want to go with my friends. I want to go with my family.
Yeah.
I want to go, use the public transport is fine. Just make it accessible. Don't invest millions in creating something that, it's segregating and it's not needed. Just talk to us and we will say what's needed. And as Sally said, it's super reasonable. You can even, sometimes name it point by point, what can make it, instantly, more accessible. So just talk to the users. That would be my main takeaway, and they will, and I think that would be very beneficial to find out, what's actually needed.
Before we just get on to where people can find out more information on both this research, on possible solutions, on how to get involved, to follow progress and all of that, we maybe let people know about that in a minute. But before we do you want to maybe just sum up, obviously the co-creation, the listening, the role of assistive technology, the feedback from cities is all very important. But is there anything else that you think it's important to say based on the research and findings that you've carried out to date?
So I would like to just mention some of the systemic changes that we feel that are required to change the mindset and set up the structures that will facilitate the adoption of accessible innovation in society, in the transport sector, but maybe in society more general. So we are going to change the buses of the bus fleets across Europe to make them green.
Yeah.
Yes, that's a reality. Let's make sure that all the new buses in the green fleet are accessible. They are designed to be accessible, period. And no bus that is inaccessible will be procured in any city. In order to do that, we need to change the standards of procurement of vehicles in cities. So we change the standards. We make part of the procurement standard a bullet point needs to be accessible in that respect, and therefore a municipality is allowed then to buy or license the best value for value for money service, assuming that it is accessible. So non-accessible vehicles are in the market at all.
Yeah.
Forbidden.
Yeah.
That's it.
Baseline requirements.
Erased from the place of the earth. We realize that a lot of transport operators shy away from engaging the users in co-creation because they don't know how to do co-creation. Usually big infrastructure projects are top-down project management. So we need to change they need to be trained in a different way of doing project management, which is why we developed the MOOC. But also we realize that the accessibility research, or even, there are not enough disabled people who are well-versed in co-creation
because nobody has actually engaged them in co-creation. So we need to develop persons with disabilities to be designers, and then consult, train, become a resource for companies to do accessibility initiatives. So one of the things that we're trying to do is to establish a center for access, like a center of excellence for accessibility design.
Yeah.
So we gather the academics, we gather the experts, like it becomes a hub, like a network of hubs that become a consultancy, a trainer, a mentor to support organizations who want to do accessibility initiatives practically.
Yeah.
And the other thing that we try to do with the MDI, like we have developed, because what gets measured gets done. So what we are trying to do is the MDI is not just a framework. We have created the app for it, like a mobile app for it, so people can go and audit the accessibility of the transport
in
their cities every day. They will be also given the capability, the functionality to take a picture and upload it and create an incident, a comment. This was my barrier. This is when it happened, where it happened, and it's geolocated. So then all this information is visualized per disability. So transport operators can see what were the problems with the buses, when was this happen, which service. Was it a problem that the blind people face? Was it a problem people in wheelchair face? So they can actually have hands-on information and to do and prioritize, because that's the other thing with the quantitative, you can prioritize to see how many people are affected in their journey. So we want to establish this observatory based on the MDI across Europe to understand how accessible our cities. We have livable cities, smart cities. Let's have accessible cities.
I was just going to add to what you were saying, Tali, is so interesting. They just kind of these very strong, concrete recommendations that'll make such a difference, and that you've got your smart cities, you've got your green cities, but ultimately all of these will interconnect and overlap because they're all about people using cities. So, your accessibility, your smart technology, your biodiversity, your usability of cities, and the kind of quality of life for everybody. And Laura, did you want to add anything to that? I mean, I think what Tali went through there were incredibly kind of concrete recommendations for everybody.
When it comes to persons with disabilities, I would also like to promote the co-design and to say that, okay, if you want to create something, bring the users from the very beginning and make them as equal partners in co-designing and co-developing something. But also, I find it super important, and there's a topic that it's often forgotten, that, okay, if you want users or a person with disability to bring their expertise, it shouldn't be taken for granted. Because what I really like about the trips, because yes, we had lots of users involved in all the 7 cities. Imagine that each of the core user team have up from 5 to 8 persons with disabilities. They're actually compensated for being there and providing expertise to the field, and to arranging the meetings, to providing feedback, constant feedback, to being in the workshops. Because I think that it's very often taken for granted that, okay, the persons with disabilities, they just come and deliver something while transport providers, they're actually getting paid for this because that's their job. And I really much like to advocate for that. That's okay. If you want something to be done on an equal basis, you need to not to pay, but to make sure that the person's efforts are valued. Yeah, and acknowledged. And I find it super important because, at ANIL and other local disability NGOs, we often hear, hey, but isn't it hard for you just to come, and give the feedback? It's for greater good. Yes, it's for greater good, but can you imagine how many times I'm asked to do this in the process, and keeping in mind that we all, have lives, actually. Yeah. We have work, we study, we have families, leisure time, anything. So I would, to say that, if and it's also like very, how to say, the equality comes here, like, okay, if you consider everyone equal, that should be, equal understanding that their work is also matters.
Exactly.
Much.
And that expertise has value.
I mean, of course, we're nice people. And if you ask me, like, coming like small, companies or something, I would never say no. But keeping in mind, if you have opportunities, it would be nice, to make sure that you're giving something in return. And that shouldn't be cookies and coffee, I will not be very innovative here, but I would say when it comes to persons with disabilities and any changes either in public transport or whatever you're implying to do is nothing without us.
Yeah.
Nothing about us without us. So I think it's really the heart of the message that, okay, if you want to do something and to make sure it works, get the users involved from the very beginning, and don't be scared, if it's not going according to the plan, because it's not so easy as it might seem as a paper, but I think it always pays off, the effort. If there's commitment and effort and time dedicated to work in a co-design manner, I think eventually it will work out. So just do it.
Just do it, yeah. And Tali?
Yeah. I don't think I would dilute the message of Laura, because that is the message. Don't shy away of interacting with users if you want to make accessibility happen. It will save money, it will save time, it will have maximum impact, so we can achieve more together. And that's that. And this is at a practical level, at a sector level, at the political level. It just involves directly the users in all these processes to make things happen.
Very well said. So to finish, you're both doing incredibly important work and incredibly interesting work. So we'll post all of the information on our website so that people can learn more about TRIPS, about the Mobility Divide Index, about the research, about the possible solutions. And I'm really looking forward to keeping in touch and following progress and hearing more and learning more, and hopefully applying all of your good work to our own work. So thank you.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to your audience. And indeed, we really appreciate your time and your effort, and we look forward to future engagement. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us and for the flexibility, for making the time. It was a pleasure, to speak about TRIPS and to bring the messages from TRIPS to you and to your listeners. So thanks a lot.
It's incredible work. So yeah, thank you.
So that's it for this episode. We hope you enjoyed hearing from Lyra and Tali and their great work on accessibility and mobility across Europe. For those curious to learn more, we highly recommend checking out the trips-project.eu website, where you can participate in mobility surveys, learn about the co-design toolkit, and read all about the Mobility Divide Index research. We will also link to it in our episode notes and on our website. Thank you to our host Sarah O'Donnell, to Trevor Cudden on sound, to the production team Kathleen Jacoby, Rachel Cahill and Claire Scott, to Sinead Foley from TU Dublin, who designed our fantastic graphics, and to everyone else who helped make this podcast. Please send us your comments and feedback to allaboard@tii.ie. And for more episodes from All Aboard, please go to Spotify, iTunes, or wherever you get your podcasts. Until next time.